Pine Ridge, Wyoming, spring of 1938. Jesse Montgomery sat in the rocking chair he had built 59 years before. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, rested on the armrests, where decades of use had worn the wood smooth as river stone. Through the window behind him, tulips bloomed in neat rows, their colors bright against the gray wooden walls of Haven House. Across from him, his grandson Thomas stood in a brand-new Army uniform. 18 years old, the boy's hands shook slightly as he held the draft notice, the paper trembling like a leaf before a storm. Thomas looked up. His eyes, Sarah's eyes, held a question he couldn't quite voice. Jesse knew that look. He had worn it himself once, a lifetime ago, when the world had crumbled beneath his feet and he had been forced to choose between pride and survival. The old man shifted in his chair. The wood creaked, a familiar sound that had marked countless nights of keeping vigil, of rocking babies to sleep, of waiting for dawn to break over impossible darkness. Thomas spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, I'm scared. Scared I won't be strong enough to do the right thing when it matters." Jesse didn't answer immediately. He stood slowly, his joints protesting the movement, and walked to the window. Outside, women worked in the garden. Children played between the rows. Life continued as it always had, sustained by choices made long ago in desperation and hope. "You think strength is not being afraid." Jesse's voice was low, rough from 85 years of living. He kept his gaze on the tulips, on the legacy his wife had planted and their family had tended ever since. Thomas didn't respond. Jesse turned, his eyes still sharp despite his age, fixed on his grandson. "Let me tell you about the night I knelt in the snow like a beggar. The night I cried like a child and knocked on the door of a woman the whole town called a baby killer. That was the night I learned real strength isn't never falling down. It's knowing when you need help getting back up." He moved to the table where an old photograph sat in a wooden frame. Two images side by side. Sarah young and smiling, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Clara solemn and beautiful, holding an infant against her chest. That night, December of 1879, I was 26 years old. Your grandmother Sarah had just died. Your father Eli was dying in my arms. And I was about to do the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. Jesse picked up the photograph, his thumb tracing the worn edge. I was about to ask for help from someone the whole world had decided was cursed. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Thomas leaned forward, the draft notice forgotten in his lap. Jesse set down the photograph and returned to his chair. As he lowered himself into the familiar embrace of the wood, his mind traveled back through the decades. Back to cold and death and impossible choices. Back to the moment everything changed. "It was December 1879, he began, and the worst blizzard Wyoming had seen in 20 years was about to teach me what a man really is. Pine Ridge, Wyoming territory, December 1879. The cold came like a living thing, hungry and relentless. It crept through gaps in the cabin walls, turned breath to ice crystals, made the very act of living feel like an insult to nature's fury. Jesse Montgomery sat beside his wife's grave, his newborn son wrapped in every blanket he owned. Snow had already begun to cover the fresh-turned earth, erasing the wound in the ground, as if Sarah had never existed at all. 4 days. It had been 4 days since she died. He remembered every second of it, every drop of blood, every weakening breath, every moment of helpless watching as the woman he loved slipped away despite everything he tried to do. Doc Peterson had come at midnight when Sarah's labor began. By 3 in the morning, his face had gone white as the sheets Jesse kept bringing kept soaking with his wife's blood, kept throwing away, because there weren't enough cloths in the entire territory to stop what was happening. Sarah had lasted until 3:47. Jesse knew because he had counted her heartbeats as they grew further apart, counted the seconds between her breaths, counted to keep from screaming. Her last words had been simple, clear, a command wrapped in a plea. "Promise me you'll take care of him." "I promise, Sarah. I swear to God I promise." She had smiled then, just a little, just enough to break his heart completely. And then she was gone. The baby Eli had cried once. A thin, weak sound that spoke of life, clinging desperately to a world that had just taken his mother. Now, 4 days later, that cry had faded to almost nothing. Jesse checked his son's vitals the way Doc Peterson had taught him. Pulse at the fontanelle, that soft spot on top of the skull, where an infant's bones hadn't yet fused. It fluttered too fast. 140 beats per minute. Dehydration did that, made the heart race to compensate for blood volume that was dropping by the hour. He pressed gently on Eli's skin, watching how long it took to return to normal. The skin turgor test Doc had shown him. Healthy babies, the skin snapped back immediately. Eli's skin stayed tented, a visible ridge that spoke of severe fluid loss. The baby's mucous membranes, the inside of his tiny mouth, were dry as paper. His eyes had begun to sink into his skull. His breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps, 60 breaths per minute when it should have been 40. Jesse had tried everything. He had milked their cow at 3 in the morning, testing the temperature against his wrist the way Sarah had taught him when they talked about having children. Too hot would burn, too cold wouldn't digest. It had to be perfect. Eli had vomited it all up within minutes, his tiny body rejecting what it couldn't process. Goat's milk. Same result, sugar water carefully measured. The baby had screamed, his face twisting in agony as his stomach cramped and rejected even that. Doc Peterson had been blunt when Jesse carried Eli to his office on the second day. The boy needs mother's milk. Nothing else will do. Some babies are like that. Their systems can't handle anything but what nature intended. Then find me someone who can help. The doctor had already been packing his bag, his movements quick and final. That's not my job, Montgomery. Try the women in town. Someone might be willing. Someone might be willing. Jesse had learned very quickly that nobody was willing at all. Now he sat at Sarah's grave, his son dying in his arms, and tried to find the will to keep going. The wind cut through his coat like knives. His feet had gone numb an hour ago. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore, except as distant aches that didn't seem connected to his body. None of it mattered. His son was dying, and a man's pride wouldn't save him. Jesse stood. He wrapped Eli tighter against his chest, layering the blankets until only the baby's tiny face showed. Then he began the walk back to town. He didn't pray. Hadn't prayed since Sarah died. What kind of God took a woman like her and left the world darker for it? What kind of God let innocent children starve? But he walked anyway, one foot in front of the other, because that's what a man did when everything else was stripped away. He moved forward. He tried, even when trying felt like spitting into a hurricane. The first door he knocked on belonged to Ruth Jennings, the town's oldest midwife. She had delivered half the babies in Pine Ridge over the past 40 years. If anyone would understand, it would be her. She opened the door just wide enough to peer out. Her face, weathered by decades of hard living, held no warmth. "Mr. Montgomery." Jesse didn't waste words. He pulled back the blanket so she could see Eli's face. The baby's skin had taken on a gray pallor. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Ruth's expression didn't change. "I heard about Sarah. I'm sorry for your loss. My son needs help. He needs mother's milk. He can't keep anything else down. I'm 65 years old, Mr. Montgomery." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I can't help you." "Then who can? Try the Morrison woman, 3rd Street. The door closed. Jesse stood there for 3 full seconds, his mind refusing to process what had just happened. Then Eli whimpered a sound so weak it barely qualified as human, and Jesse moved. 3rd Street was 6 blocks away. The wind had picked up, driving snow sideways into his face. Each breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Mrs. Morrison answered on the 3rd knock. She had a baby on each hip and 3 more children hanging off her skirts like remoras on a shark. Her belly swelled with another child on the way. Jesse opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off before he could begin. "I know what you want. The answer is no." "Please, ma'am, he's dying. I barely have enough for my own 8. Can't be wet nurse to every orphan in Wyoming." She started to close the door. Jesse put his hand against it, not pushing, just holding it open. "Where else can I go?" Something flickered in Mrs. Morrison's eyes, not compassion exactly, but perhaps the ghost of it. "Try the widow on Oak Street, Mrs. Brennan. She had a baby in September." Then the door was closing, pushing against his hand with steady, inexorable pressure. Jesse let it go. Oak Street, another 4 blocks north. The snow was coming down harder now, accumulating in drifts that caught at his boots with each step. Mrs. Brennan's house stood dark. Jesse knocked anyway. 3 times. 4. 5. A curtain twitched. He saw her, face pale and frightened, peering out at him. Their eyes met. She let the curtain fall and disappeared back into the darkness of her house. Jesse knocked again, harder this time, his knuckles splitting against the rough wood. Nothing. He stood there as the truth settled into his bones like the cold. She wasn't coming. She had seen his dying son and decided her fear of scandal was more important than a child's life. By noon, word had spread. Jesse heard the whispers as he walked through town, heard them despite the wind, despite his desperate focus on just keeping moving. That Montgomery fellow is going door to door, asking women to nurse his baby. Lord have mercy, what kind of man does that? The desperate kind, I reckon. Jesse pushed through the door of the general store. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Ezra Blackwood stood behind the counter, mid-50s, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He owned half the buildings on Main Street. His opinion carried weight in Pine Ridge, and everyone knew it. Mr. Montgomery, Ezra's voice dripped false sympathy. Heard you're having some trouble. I need help, Mr. Blackwood. My son is dying. Yes, I heard. Tragic situation, real tragic. Jesse waited. Around him, the store had gone silent. People pretended to browse, but every ear was tuned to this conversation. Do you know anyone who might be able to help? Ezra leaned forward, his elbows on the counter. I know plenty of decent women in this town, and not a single one of them wants some stranger's baby at her breast. That's not how things work around here, Montgomery. Then how do things work? I just watched my son die. That's between you and the Almighty. Ezra shrugged, a theatrical gesture meant for the watching crowd. Maybe if you'd taken better care of your wife, she'd still be here to feed him. Jesse moved before he could think. His hand closed around Ezra's collar, yanking the older man halfway across the counter. Coffee cups rattled. Someone gasped. Jesse's voice went deadly quiet. Finish that sentence. I dare you. Ezra's face cycled through pale to red in the space of a heartbeat. Get your hands off me, Montgomery, or I'll have the sheriff drag you to jail. Jesse! A woman's voice, soft but firm. Jesse turned. Ruth Jennings stood in the doorway, snow-dusting her shawl. Let him go. This won't help your boy. Jesse released Ezra and followed Ruth outside. The cold air hit him like a physical force after the warmth of the store. Ruth looked around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I can't help you myself, but there's someone who might. Clara Whitmore. Lives in the old Dawson place, east edge of town. Blue door. I don't know her. Nobody does. Not anymore. Ruth pulled her shawl tighter. She lost her own baby 2 months back. Husband blamed her and left. Town's been calling her cursed ever since. Why would she help me if the whole town hates her? Because she knows what you're feeling right now. Ruth's eyes met his. She knows what it's like to hold a dying baby and have nobody give a damn. Jesse looked down at Eli. The baby had stopped moving entirely. Only the faint rise and fall of his chest indicated life still clung to him. Will she help? I don't know, but she's your last chance. Ruth started to walk away, then stopped. In Montgomery, the things people say about her, they're not true. She didn't kill her baby. She just couldn't save him. There's a difference, Jeremias. Then she was gone, disappearing around the corner like a ghost. Jesse adjusted his grip on Eli and looked east, the edge of town where respectable folks stopped building houses, where the cursed and forgotten lived in exile. His last chance. He started walking. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, taking what little warmth it had provided with it. Temperature dropped. Jesse's legs burned with each step. His lungs ached. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass coated in ice. But he kept walking. Past the livery stable where horses stamped and whinnied at the storm. Past the abandoned mill where machinery rusted in perpetual silence. Past the last gas lamp that marked the boundary between Pine Ridge proper and the wilderness beyond. And there it was. A small house run down with shutters hanging crooked on their hinges. The paint had long since faded from exposure to sun and snow and wind, but the door was still visible in the growing darkness. Blue, bright blue, like a beacon in the gray wasteland. Jesse stopped at the gate. His body screamed at him to sit, to rest, to give in to the exhaustion that threatened to drag him down into the snow. Two men stood across the street, smoking under a porch overhang. One of them called out, "Hey, stranger, you don't want to go in there." Jesse turned slowly. "Why not?" "That's the Whitmore place." The man spat a stream of tobacco juice that steamed in the cold. "Cursed woman lives there. Killed her own baby, they say." "They say wrong. You don't know that." Jesse took a step toward them. His voice came out colder than the wind. "I know a woman who loses a child doesn't need idiots spreading lies about her. I know grief doesn't make someone a killer. And I know if either of you says another word about her, I'll make sure you eat your teeth for breakfast." The men exchanged glances. One muttered something that sounded like "crazy bastard" before they retreated inside. Jesse turned back to the blue door, walked up the path, raised his fist, and hesitated. What he was about to do hit him fully. Knock on a stranger's door in the middle of the night. Ask her to nurse his son. It was improper, indecent, the kind of thing that could ruin both their reputations permanently. But Eli had stopped moving entirely in his arms. Jesse knocked. Nothing. He knocked again harder. "Please, I need help. My baby is dying." Silence pressed in from all sides. Jesse slammed his palm against the wood. Once, twice, 3 times. "I know you're in there. Please, I'm not leaving until you open this door." Still nothing. Jesse's legs gave out. He slid down until he was kneeling in the snow, his forehead pressed against the cold wood of that blue door, the position of a supplicant, a beggar, a man with nothing left but desperation. "Please," his voice broke. "I'm begging you. I have nowhere else to go. Nobody else will help. My wife's dead. My son's dying. I can't do this alone." Tears froze on his cheeks as soon as they fell. His shoulders shook with sobs he'd been holding back for 4 days. "His name's Eli. Elijah after my wife's grandfather. She never even got to hold him properly. Just once, and then she was gone." Jesse pulled Eli closer, feeling how cold the baby had become, feeling how still. "He's all I have left of her, and he's slipping away, and I can't stop it, and nobody cares, and I don't know what to do." The silence stretched. Jesse closed his eyes and tried to pray, but no words came. Just that endless howling wind and the knowledge that he had failed. Failed Sarah, failed Eli, failed as a man and a husband and a father. Then he heard it, the click of a lock turning, the creak of hinges, light spilled out onto the snow. Jesse looked up. A woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the lamplight behind her. She was younger than he expected, maybe 28, dark hair pulled back tight, cheekbones sharp from not eating enough, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much suffering and felt even more. She didn't say anything, just stared at him, this man kneeling in her doorway like a penitent before an altar. Jesse tried to speak, but his voice failed. He held up Eli instead, letting her see the gray skin, the sunken eyes, the shallow breathing of a child balanced on the knife edge between life and death. The woman's gaze dropped to the bundle in his arms. Something flickered across her face. Pain, recognition, the look of someone seeing their own wound reflected back at them. "How long?" Her voice came out rough, like she hadn't used it in days. 4 days, since my wife died birthing him. "Has he fed it all?" "Tried everything, cow's milk, goat's milk, sugar water. He can't keep any of it down." The woman closed her eyes. Her hand gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. Jesse watched her throat work as she swallowed hard. When her eyes opened again, they were dark brown, filled with something he couldn't name. "The town calls me a baby killer." "I don't care what the town calls you. They'll call you worse if you come inside. Let them." She studied his face for a long moment. Jesse met her gaze without flinching. A man who had already decided, who had already weighed the cost and found it acceptable. "Why should I help you? I don't know you. You don't know me." Jesse struggled to his feet, his legs screaming in protest. He held Eli out with shaking hands. "Because he's innocent. He didn't choose this. Didn't choose to lose his mother. Didn't choose to be born hungry. Didn't choose any of it." His voice cracked. "And because I think you know what it feels like to watch a baby slip away, to feel helpless, to have nobody give a damn." The woman flinched like he'd struck her. "You don't know anything about me. I know you lost your son. I know your husband blamed you and left. I know the whole town turned on you." Jesse stepped closer. And I know you opened this door even after everything. You opened it. That tells me everything I need to know." She stared at him. Seconds stretched into forever. The wind howled, snow fell, the world held its breath. Then she stepped back. "Get inside before you both freeze to death." The house was warm. Jesse hadn't realized how cold he'd been until heat hit his skin. His whole body started shaking violent tremors he couldn't control. "Sit down before you fall down." The woman pointed to a chair by the stove. Jesse stumbled toward it, his legs barely holding him upright. "Give me the baby." Jesse hesitated. "I'm not going to hurt him." Her voice softened slightly. "I promise." He handed Eli over, watching as she unwrapped the blankets with practiced hands. Her breath caught when she saw his face fully in the light. "Lord have mercy, he's barely alive." "I know." She pressed her fingers against Eli's tiny chest, counting heartbeats just like Jesse had done 100 times. Her lips moved silently, calculating, measuring how close to death this child really was. His color's bad, breathing shallow. She looked up, meeting Jesse's eyes. "This might not work. You understand that he might be too far gone." "I understand. And if it does work, he'll need to feed every few hours, for weeks, maybe months. I'll need to be available day and night." "I understand. The town's going to talk. They're going to say ugly things about both of us." "I don't care." The woman studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his soul through his eyes. "What's your name?" Jesse Montgomery." "I'm Clara." She shifted Eli in her arms. "Your wife. What was her name?" "Sarah." The word hurt coming out. Like speaking it made her death more real somehow. "Sarah," Clara repeated, her voice gentle. "She picked the name Elijah, after her grandfather. She said he was the kindest man she ever knew." Something shifted in Clara's expression. The hardness cracked just a little, revealing the raw wound beneath. "My boy was William. I called him Will." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He was 10 weeks old, healthy one day, gone the next. Just gone. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be quiet." Clara moved toward a rocking chair in the corner. She sat down, adjusting Eli in her arms, then turned the chair so she faced away from Jesse. He understood immediately. Turned to face the wall, giving her privacy, respecting boundaries even in desperation. Behind him, fabric rustled. The chair creaked as it began to rock. Clara's voice murmured something he couldn't make out, soft words meant only for the baby. Then silence. Jesse's heart stopped. "Please, please let this work. Please let him eat. Please don't let me lose him too." A small sound broke the silence. Wet, rhythmic, unmistakable. Suckling. His son was feeding. Jesse's legs buckled. He caught himself on the wall, pressing his forehead against the rough wood. Tears streamed down his face, hot against skin that was still numb from cold. "He's eating." Clara's voice came quietly from behind him. "He's doing good. Strong instincts." Jesse couldn't speak, could barely breathe. His son was alive. His son was feeding. His son was going to survive. "Thank you." The words came out broken. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough." "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go. Tonight's just the beginning." "I don't care. Whatever it takes. I'll do anything." Clara was quiet for a moment, just the sound of Eli nursing, the wind howling outside, the crackle of the fire in the stove. "My husband left 2 days after we buried Will." Her voice was carefully neutral, but Jesse heard the pain underneath. "Packed his bags, said he couldn't look at me without seeing our dead son. Said I must have done something wrong. Smothered him in my sleep maybe. Or missed some sign he was sick." "That's not your fault. I didn't kill my baby." Clara's voice hardened like steel. "I loved him more than anything in this world. I checked on him every hour, every single hour, and still I woke up one morning and he was cold and I couldn't bring him back no matter what I did." Jesse heard her draw a shaky breath. "The town decided I was guilty anyway. No proof, no evidence, just whispers and sideways looks. They cross the street when they see me coming. Leave the store when I walk in." She laughed bitterly. "Baby killer. That's what they call me. The woman who loved her son so much, she would have died for him. Baby killer. They're wrong. Of course they're wrong, but being right doesn't matter much when you're alone. Eli made a small sound, satisfied, content, the sound of a baby who had finally gotten what he needed. He's slowing down, down, Clara said, getting sleepy. That's good, means he's full. Can I turn around? Yes. Jessie turned to find Clara still in the rocking chair Eli cradled against her chest. She'd covered herself, but the intimacy of the scene still struck him. This stranger feeding his son, saving his life, becoming something he didn't have words for yet. You can come closer. He's your boy. Jessie crossed the room slowly like approaching something sacred. He knelt beside the chair. Eli's face had been transformed, pink instead of gray, relaxed instead of twisted with hunger. His tiny fist clutched at Clara's dress like he was afraid to let go. He looks like Sarah, around the eyes. Good. He should look like his mother. Clara stroked the baby's head with gentle fingers. Sarah sounds like she was a good woman. Best woman I ever knew. Then Eli's lucky. He's got good blood. She shifted the sleeping baby carefully. Here, take him. Put him against your chest, skin to skin if you can. He needs to know his father's smell, his father's heartbeat. Jessie took his son with trembling hands, unbuttoned his shirt, pressed Eli against his bare chest. The baby sighed, burrowed closer, his tiny hand opening and closing against Jessie's skin. That's right, Clara murmured. That's your papa, little one. He's not going anywhere. The storm raged outside. Inside, the fire crackled. Eli slept breathing steadily for the first time in 4 days. Jessie sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe wrong, afraid to disturb this impossible miracle. Clara stood and moved to the kitchen, her movements quiet and efficient, the sound of water heating, coffee grounds measured out, the small domestic rituals of a woman used to being alone. You can't take him back out in this, she said finally, not looking at him. The storm won't break till morning, maybe later. I know. Boarding house is half a mile. In this weather, carrying a newborn, you'd both freeze. I know. Clara poured 2 cups of coffee, brought one to him. Their eyes met. I have a spare room. It's small, but it's warm. Jessie swallowed hard. Mrs. Whitmore, you know what people will say if I stay here overnight. I know exactly what they'll say. Her jaw tightened. They'll say I lured you here, seduced a grieving widower, used your dying baby to get a man in my bed. That's not what's happening here. That's exactly what they'll say. She sat down across from him. Question is, do you care? Jessie looked at Eli, sleeping peacefully, breathing steadily, alive. No, he said quietly. I don't care. Then stay. Your boy needs to feed again in a few hours. Better he's warm and safe than dying in a snowbank, because we were too worried about what folks might think. Jessie nodded slowly. Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Don't. Clara held up her hand. Don't thank me. Don't promise me anything. Don't make this into something it's not. What is it then? She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. 2 people who lost everything trying to keep one small thing alive. She stood. That's all it is. That's all it can be. She showed him to the spare room, small, like she'd said, a narrow bed, a worn quilt, a window that rattled with wind. I'll wake you when he needs to feed again. Try to get some sleep. You look like death warmed over. The door closed behind her. Jessie lay down on the bed Eli pressed against his chest. The baby's heartbeat thudded steadily against his own, a rhythm that said life continued, that hope remained, that tomorrow might come after all. Your mama's watching over you, Jessie whispered into the darkness. I know she is. And she sent us to this woman, this Clara. She sent us here because she knew. Eli's hand curled around Jessie's finger. Tiny, perfect, alive. I'm going to keep my promise, Sarah. I'm going to take care of him. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, I'm going to make sure he grows up strong and good just like you wanted. The wind howled, snow piled against the window. But inside this small room in this house on the edge of town, a dying baby had been given a second chance. And 2 broken people had found something neither expected. Hope. Haven House. Spring 1938. Jessie blinked, the memory fading like morning fog. He was old again. 85 years of living weighing on bones that had once carried him through blizzards. Thomas sat forward in his chair, his eyes wet. And Eli, did he survive? Jesse smiled. It was a small thing, that smile, but it carried decades of gratitude. Your father lived because Clara Whitmore opened that door. He grew up knowing two mothers, one who gave him life, one who saved it. And you and Mrs. Whitmore. What happened next? Next, Jesse's smile faded. Next came the hard part, grandson. Surviving that first night was just the beginning. The real test came when the town found out where I'd spent the night. When Ezra Blackwood decided to make us pay for our audacity. When we had to choose between what was right and what was easy. He stood slowly, his joints protesting. But that's a story for after dinner. Come help me set the table. Your grandmother taught me that some stories need to be broken up with food and breathing room. They're too heavy to carry all at once. Thomas rose, following his grandfather toward the kitchen. Behind them, the photograph remained on the table. Two women separated by death, but united in love for the same child. Outside, the tulips bloomed in rows Sarah had planned and Clara had planted. A legacy written in flowers and choices, and the simple act of opening a door when the whole world said to keep it closed. Haven House. Spring 1938. The kitchen smelled of coffee and bread, simple smells that spoke of home and continuity. Jesse poured 2 cups while Thomas set plates on the worn wooden table. They moved in comfortable silence, the kind that exists between family members who understand that some moments don't need words. Thomas finished arranging the silverware and sat down. His hands, young and unblemished, rested on the table next to Jesse's aged ones. 3 generations of Montgomery men visible in those hands. Strength passed down through blood and example. You said the hard part came next, Thomas spoke quietly, but Eli was saved. You'd found someone to help. Wasn't that enough? Jesse set down his coffee cup. The ceramic clinked against wood, a small sound that seemed loud in the afternoon stillness. Saving a life isn't hard, grandson. What's hard is living with what you have to sacrifice to save it. And harder still is when people try to force you to choose between your honor and your child's survival. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. That first night in Clara's house, I thought the worst was over. Thought we'd found a way forward. I didn't understand yet that mercy always comes with a price, and the town of Pine Ridge was about to make sure we paid it in full. Thomas waited patient as his grandfather's mind traveled back through the decades once more. It was still December 1879, Jesse continued. The storm hadn't broken, and inside that small house with the blue door, your father and I were about to learn what it really means to depend on someone. Pine Ridge, Wyoming Territory, December 1879. Jesse woke to crying, not the weak, desperate sound Eli had made for 4 days, but something stronger, hungrier. The cry of a baby who expected to be fed and knew he would be. He sat up disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Gray light filtered through the window, dawn or close to it. The storm still raged outside, but softer now, winding down after spending its fury through the night. The door opened before Jesse could stand. Clara was already there, her hair loose around her shoulders, a shawl wrapped over her nightgown. Give him here. Her voice was matter-of-fact, carrying no judgment about the hour or the interruption. This was simply what needed to happen. Jesse handed Eli over. The baby's cries intensified for a moment, then subsided as Clara adjusted him against her chest. She turned toward the door without another word. I can stay, Jesse offered. Help somehow. Sleep. You're no good to him, exhausted. She was already moving down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Jesse heard the creak of the rocking chair, soft murmur of her voice as she settled Eli. Then silence broken only by the rhythmic sound of feeding. Jesse lay back down but didn't close his eyes. He stared at the ceiling, listening to his son eat, and tried to process what had happened. In the space of 8 hours, his entire world had shifted. A stranger had become the most important person in his life, not because he loved her, but because she held his son's survival in her hands. That dependency terrified him more than the dying had. 3 hours later, Eli cried again. Clara appeared at the door once more, took the baby, disappeared. The ritual repeated at 9 in the morning, then noon, then 3 in the afternoon. Each time Clara asked for nothing, demanded nothing. She simply took Eli, fed him, and returned him. Her face remained neutral, professional, as if she were performing a bomb rather than saving a life. Jesse tried to find ways to repay her. He chopped wood, stacking it neatly beside the stove. He fixed the loose shutter on the east window that had been banging in the wind. He swept the kitchen floor, washed the dishes from breakfast, carried water from the well. Clara watched him work, but said nothing. No thank you. No protest. Just quiet observation as this stranger moved through her space trying to earn his keep. By evening, the storm had passed. Jesse stood at the window, watching the sunset over snow-covered Pine Ridge. The town looked peaceful from here, beautiful even its ugliness hidden under a blanket of white. The road should be clear by noon tomorrow, Clara said from behind him. You can go back to the boarding house. Collect your things. Jessie turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway, Eli asleep in her arms. The boarding house is half a mile from here. If Eli needs to feed every few hours, I know what you're thinking. Clara crossed to the rocking chair and sat adjusting Eli carefully. And the answer is yes, you can stay. The spare room has been empty since Thomas left anyway. Clara, Jessie chose his words carefully, you know what people will say. A widower and a widow under the same roof, unmarried with a baby. They'll talk. Let them talk. They've been talking about me for 2 months already. What's a few more lies? She met his eyes. But we need to be clear about this. This isn't about love or romance or whatever the town will say it is. This is about survival. Your baby needs milk. I can provide it. You need a place to stay. I have a house. That's all this is. Jessie crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. That's all I'm asking for. Good. Clara looked down at Eli, her expression softening slightly. Then go get your things. And Jessie, yes, prepare yourself. By this afternoon, the whole town will know you spent the night here, and they won't be kind. Jessie walked to the boarding house through streets that had been transformed. Snow covered everything, muffling sound, hiding edges. Children played in drifts. Men shoveled walkways. Women hung laundry on lines, the wet clothes freezing stiff before they could dry. Normal life, continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Jessie saw it in the way conversations stopped when he passed, in how women pulled their children closer, in the way men turned to stare their faces hard with judgment they had already decided was justified. Mrs. Parker waited at the boarding house door. A thin woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, she ran the cleanest establishment in Pine Ridge and charged accordingly. Mr. Montgomery, her voice could have frozen water. I wasn't expecting you back. Just came to collect my things, ma'am. Your things. She blocked the doorway. And where exactly were you last night? Because I have 3 other boarders who heard you leave before dark and never return. Jessie kept his voice level. My son was dying. I found someone who could help. Yes, I heard who helped. Mrs. Parker's lip curled. The whole town's heard. That woman. That cursed woman. She saved my son's life. She opened her legs is what she did. The words came out like a slap. And now you're ruined, both of you. Mrs. Parker stepped back. Your room has been cleared. Your belongings are in a box by the back door. I'll thank you to take them and leave. This is a respectable establishment, Mr. Montgomery. I can't have your scandal touching my other guests. Mrs. Parker, please just tell me one thing. Is there anyone in this town, anyone at all, who would help feed my son? Anyone besides Clara Whitmore? The landlady's expression flickered. For just a moment, something like sympathy crossed her face. There was a widow up on Oak Street. Mrs. Brennan. Lost her husband last spring, had a baby in September. She paused. But she left town 2 weeks ago. Couldn't afford to stay. Anyone else? Not that I know of. The door pushed against his hand with steady, inexorable pressure. I'm sorry about your son. Truly I am. But there's nothing more I can do. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Jessie found his belongings exactly where she'd said. A wooden crate containing everything he owned. His spare clothes, his shaving kit, Sarah's Bible, the photograph from their wedding day, the edges worn from being handled too many times. Everything that remained of his old life fit in a single box. He lifted it and started walking back toward the edge of town, back toward the blue door that had become his only refuge. Sheriff Tom Dawkins intercepted him halfway there, a big man in his mid-50s with a face that had seen too much to judge easily. He fell into step beside Jessie without preamble. Montgomery, heard you had a rough night. Heard I spent it at the Whitmore place too, I'd wager. News travels fast in a small town. Dawkins kept his voice neutral. I'm not here to judge. Just wanted you to know some folks are talking. Ezra Blackwood's have been making noise since sunup. Jesse's jaw tightened. What kind of noise? The kind that gets people riled up. He's telling everyone you spent the night with the Whitmore woman, making it sound improper. My son was dying sheriff. She fed him. She saved his life. That's all that happened. I believe you. Dawkins lowered his voice. But Ezra's got friends on the town council, and the council has opinions about moral conduct. Moral conduct. Jesse laughed a bitter sound. Yesterday, this whole town let my son starve. Now they want to talk about morality. I know it's not fair, but fair doesn't run this town. Politics do. The sheriff stopped walking and put a hand on Jesse's shoulder. Just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Ezra Blackwood doesn't like losing, and he's decided you're someone worth beating. Why, what did I ever do to him? Dawkins hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was in earshot. Clara Whitmore before she married Thomas. Ezra courted her for almost a year. Thought he had a claim on her. Then Thomas came to town, and she chose him instead. Jesse felt something cold settle in his stomach. So this is about jealousy. This is about a man who doesn't like being told no, who's been waiting for a chance to destroy Clara ever since she refused him. Dawkins started walking again. Now you've given him one. Jesse absorbed this information in silence. They were almost to Clara's house now, the blue door visible in the distance. One more thing, Dawkins said quietly. You asked why Ezra cares so much. It's not just about Clara, it's about power. Ezra owns half this town. People do what he says because crossing him means losing your business, your home, your place in society. But you crossed him yesterday in his own store, put your hands on him, made him look weak in front of witnesses. He insulted my dead wife. I know, and I'd have done the same in your position. The sheriff tipped his hat. But knowing why a snake strikes doesn't make the venom hurt less. Watch yourself, Montgomery, and watch Mrs. Whitmore. Ezra's not done with either of you. Clara was in the kitchen when Jesse returned. Eli lay in a basket beside her, sleeping peacefully while she kneaded bread dough. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, pushing and folding, creating something from almost nothing. She didn't look up when he entered. Did you find another way? No. Didn't think you would. Jesse set his crate down by the door. Everything he owned, everything he was. Clara, I need to tell you something about Ezra Blackwood. She kept kneading. I know about Ezra. The sheriff said he courted you before you married Thomas. For 11 months. Her hands stilled on the dough. He was persistent, I'll give him that. Flowers every week, invitations to dinner, promises about the life we'd have together if I'd just say yes. Why didn't you? Clara looked up, her eyes hard. Because I didn't love him. Because there was something cold behind all those pretty words. Like he wanted to own me, not marry me. She went back to kneading her movements, more aggressive now. Then Thomas arrived. He was a ranch hand, worked for the Dawson family. No money, no prospects, just a good man with kind eyes who made me laugh. Her voice softened. I chose him, and Ezra never forgave me for it. The sheriff thinks Ezra's going to come after us, make trouble because I'm staying here. I know he will. Clara shaped the dough into a loaf and set it in a pan. But what choice do we have? Eli needs to eat every few hours. You can't be half a mile away, so either you stay here and we face whatever Ezra throws at us, or you leave and your son dies. She washed her hands in the basin, dried them on her apron, then turned to face him fully. I've already lost one child, Jesse. I'm not strong enough to watch another one die because we were too scared of gossip to do what needed doing. Jesse looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what he'd missed in the desperation of last night. Clara Whitmore wasn't fragile, wasn't weak. She'd been broken by loss and put herself back together through sheer will. The scars showed, but so did the strength. Thank you, he said quietly, for all of this, for him, for me. Don't thank me yet. Clara moved to check on Eli. We don't know what's coming. We just know it won't be easy. She was right. It wasn't easy at all. 3 days passed. Jesse and Clara fell into a rhythm born of necessity. He did the heavy work around the house. She cared for Eli. They ate meals together in near silence, speaking only when necessary, two people orbiting around a tiny life that needed both of them to survive. Jesse slept in the spare room. Clara kept her door closed at night. They maintained proper distance, even as the town's whispers grew louder. On the fourth morning, Jesse woke to find Clara sitting at the kitchen table, Eli in her arms, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer immediately, just kept staring, her expression unreadable. "Eli smiled at me yesterday, a real smile, not just gas, and I realized something." "What?" "I'm going to have to give him back." Her voice was barely audible. "In a few weeks, maybe a month or two, he'll be strong enough to take regular milk. Won't need me anymore, and you'll take him back to your ranch, and I'll be alone again." Jesse sat down across from her. "Clara, look at me." She looked up, and he saw tears in her eyes that she was too proud to let fall. "I don't have answers about what happens later. Can't promise anything, because I don't know what tomorrow looks like, much less next month." He reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "But I know Eli needs you. I know I need you. And I know that whatever comes next, we figure it out together." Clara's grip tightened on his hand. "You don't owe me anything, Jesse. This isn't about debt. This is about family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you build when everything else falls apart." Before Clara could respond, someone knocked on the door. Not a polite knock. Hard. Urgent. The kind that demands immediate attention. Jesse stood and crossed to the door, opened it to find Reverend Samuel Hayes standing on the porch, hat in hand, looking more worried than Jesse had ever seen him. "Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Whitmore." The Reverend glanced nervously over his shoulder. "May I come in? We need to talk. Now." Reverend Oz sat at the kitchen table, his spectacles fogging slightly from the warmth of the house. He cleaned them with a shaking hand, a nervous gesture that sent Jesse's instincts screaming. "What's going on, Reverend?" Hayes put his spectacles back on and looked at them both. "The town council met last night. Emergency session, Ezra Blackwood called it. And he's been building support for weeks, behind the sheriff's back, behind everyone's back, really." Hayes swallowed hard. "He's pushed through enough votes to pass an ordinance." Clara's face went white. "What kind of ordinance?" "Making it illegal for unmarried men and women to cohabitate, punishable by fine and removal of any children in the household." The words hit Jesse like a physical blow. "They want to take Eli. They want to force you to leave Mrs. Whitmore's home. If you refuse, they'll declare you both unfit guardians and place Eli with a suitable family." Hayes's voice was bitter. "Ezra's already volunteered to take the child himself. Says he'll raise him proper." Jesse stood so fast his chair fell over. "Over my dead body. That man is not touching my son." "I agree, which is why I came." Hayes straightened his shoulders, finding some core of steel beneath his usual nervous demeanor. "There's one way to stop this. One thing that would make their ordinance meaningless." "What? Marriage?" The Reverend looked between them. "If you and Mrs. Whitmore were legally wed, the ordinance wouldn't apply. They couldn't separate you, couldn't take Eli." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Marriage, Bowen." Jesse looked at Clara. She had gone completely still, her arms wrapped protectively around Eli. "That's insane," she whispered. "We barely know each other." "People marry for worse reasons." Hayes spoke gently. "Dalium, money, social standing. You'd be marrying to protect a child, to protect each other. Is that really so wrong, Mom?" "I can't." Clara's voice shook. "I was married before. It ended badly. I swore I'd never put myself in that position again." Jesse crossed to where she sat and knelt beside her chair. "Clara, look at me." She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm not Thomas. I'm not going to blame you for things that aren't your fault. I'm not going to leave when things get hard. You don't know that. I know I'd die before I let them take Eli." Jesse's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I know I'd fight the whole damn town before I let Ezra Blackwood near our son." He stopped. The word had come out without thinking. "Our son, you've been feeding him, caring for him, saving him every day for almost a week now. He's as much yours as he is mine or Sarah's." Clara's chin trembled. "You're asking me to trust you. After everything. After Thomas. After this town." You're asking me to trust again. Yes. She looked at Eli. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the storm swirling around him. Her son now in every way that mattered, even if the law said different. Then she looked at Reverend Hayes. Can you perform the ceremony tonight? Hayes nodded slowly. I can. But are you certain both of you marriage is a sacred bond? It shouldn't be entered into lightly. Nothing about this has been light. Clara met Jesse's eyes, but nothing about it has been wrong either. We've been partners since the night he knocked on my door. This just makes it official. Jesse felt something shift in his chest. Not love, not yet, but something that might become love given time. Respect, trust, the foundation that could support a life together. Reverend, can you give us a moment? Hayes nodded and stepped outside. Jesse took Clara's free hand. If we do this, I need you to understand something. I love Sarah. Part of me will always love her. I can't promise that won't complicate things. I know. Clara's voice was steady now. And I need you to understand that I'm terrified. Terrified of depending on someone again. Terrified of being hurt. Terrified that this is a mistake we'll both regret. So we go into this with open eyes, no illusions, no expectations beyond keeping Eli safe and helping each other survive. And if feelings develop, if this becomes more than just an arrangement, Jesse smiled slightly, then we'll figure that out when it happens, together. Clara took a deep breath, set Eli gently in his basket, stood and smoothed her dress with shaking hands. All right then, let's get married. They stood in the small parlor, Eli's basket between them like a tiny witness. Reverend Hayes held his Bible, the worn leather cover familiar from 100 Sunday services. The ceremony was brief, no guests, no flowers, no celebration. Just three people and the words that would bind two of them together in the eyes of God and law. Do you, Jesse Montgomery, take Clara Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part? Jessie looked at Clara. Her face was pale but determined. Her hands trembled but didn't pull away when he took them. I do. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take Jesse Montgomery to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part? Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. I do. Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Hayes closed his Bible. You may kiss the bride. They stood there awkwardly, neither moving. Then Jesse leaned forward and pressed his lips to Clara's forehead. A gentle touch, nothing more. An acknowledgement of vows spoken, but not yet understood. We'll figure out the rest later, he murmured against her skin. Clara nodded, her eyes closed. Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery. Hayes smiled sadly. I'll file the certificate first thing tomorrow morning before the council can vote. This should stop Ezra's ordinance in its tracks. Thank you, Reverend, for everything. Don't thank me. Thank yourselves. Hayes picked up his hat. You're doing something brave here. Something most people wouldn't have the courage to do. Make it mean something. Both of you. Make this marriage into something real. He left into the night. Jesse and Clara stood in the empty parlor, the weight of what they'd done settling over them like snow. They were married now, bound by law, insomnia, and desperation. We're married, Clara said like she couldn't quite believe it. We're married. What do we do now? Jesse looked at Eli sleeping peacefully in his basket. Then at Clara, his wife standing close enough to touch but still somehow far away. Now we survive, same as before. And after we figure out what this is, what we want it to be. He met her eyes. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people trying to build something from nothing. Clara nodded slowly. I can live with that. Yeah. She picked up Eli's basket. I'm tired. We should sleep. Which room should I take? Your room. The same one you've been in. Clara's voice was firm. Nothing changes about that. Not until we're both ready. If we're ever ready. Okay, Jesse understood, respected the boundary. They were married on a paper, but trust couldn't be legislated into existence. It had to be earned day by day, choice by choice. Good night, Mrs. Montgomery. Clara paused at the doorway. A small smile crossed her face, the first genuine warmth he'd seen from her. "Good night, Mr. Montgomery." She disappeared into her room. The door closed softly. Jesse stood alone in the dark parlor. Through the window, he could see Pine Ridge sleeping under its blanket of snow. Peaceful, beautiful, hiding all its ugliness beneath pristine white. He pulled Sarah's ring from his pocket. He'd taken it off that morning, unable to wear both wedding rings at once. Now it sat heavy in his palm, warm from being close to his heart. "I hope you understand," he whispered to the memory of his first wife. "I hope wherever you are, you know I'm doing this for Eli, for the promise I made." No answer came, but somehow Jesse felt at peace. He slipped the ring back into his pocket next to his heart where it would stay. Sarah would always be there, but Clara was here now, real and solid, and the only reason his son still breathed. Jesse walked to the spare room, his room now in his wife's house. Their house, this strange new life they were building from grief and necessity and hope. Tomorrow the town would find out they were married. Tomorrow Ezra's ordinance would die before it could breathe. Tomorrow everything would get harder. But tonight his son was alive. Tonight he wasn't alone. Tonight that was enough. Haven House. Spring 1938. Jesse finished his coffee and set the cup down with a soft clink. Thomas sat across from him, his young face thoughtful. "You married her to save Father. I married her to save us both." Jesse's voice was quiet. "Your grandmother Clara saved your father's life, but in doing so she saved mine too. Gave me purpose when I had none. Hope when all seemed lost." "Did you love her right away, I mean?" "No." Jesse smiled slightly. "Love came later, but respect came first. Trust came first. And sometimes that's more important. Love built on sand washes away. Love built on rock endures." He stood his joints protesting. "The story's not done yet, grandson. We still have to talk about the fire, about Ezra's revenge, about the choice your grandmother and I had to make between vengeance and building something better." Thomas rose as well. "But that can wait until after we've eaten properly. Come help me with dinner. Your grandmother always said a man should know his way around a kitchen as well as a battlefield." They moved together into the preparations, the story pausing but not ending, suspended between past and present, like breath between heartbeats. Outside, the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Haven House stood solid and sure-built on foundations laid 60 years before by two broken people who chose to face an uncertain future together rather than face certain death alone. The tulips bloomed in their rows. Life continued. And somewhere in the space between memory and moment, Sarah and Clara both smiled. Haven House, Spring 938. After dinner, as the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, Jesse led Thomas back to the parlor. The evening light slanted through the windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Outside, he could hear the sounds of Haven House settling into evening routines. Women calling children in from play. The clatter of dishes being washed. Life continuing in its gentle, inevitable rhythm. Thomas sat in the same chair, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, now looking more like a boy than a soldier. Jesse returned to his rocking chair, the wood welcoming him like an old friend. "You said the hardest part was yet to come," Thomas prompted. "But you and Mrs. Montgomery were married. The ordinance couldn't touch you. Wasn't that the end of it?" Jesse's face grew somber. "That was just the beginning of the end, grandson. Ezra Blackwood didn't become the most powerful man in Pine Ridge by accepting defeat gracefully. He'd lost the legal battle, but that just made him more dangerous. A cornered animal fights hardest when it knows there's no escape." He paused, his gnarled fingers tracing the armrest of his chair. "What I'm about to tell you isn't easy. It's about fire and loss and having to choose between what you want and what's right. Your grandmother Clara taught me that lesson. Taught me that revenge is easy, but building something good from ashes takes real strength." Thomas leaned forward, his young face serious. Jesse closed his eyes, letting the memory take him. "It was 3 weeks after we married. Spring of 1880 was just starting to show itself, and I made a choice that almost cost me everything." Pine Ridge, Wyoming Territory, March 1880. The marriage had changed things in ways Jesse hadn't expected. Not between him and Clara, they still maintained their careful distance, still slept in separate rooms, still moved around each other with the politeness of strangers. But the town's attitude had shifted. Being married made them legitimate in ways that living together never could. Women nodded to Clara on the street now instead of crossing to avoid her. Men tipped their hats to Jesse. Not everyone, not the friends Ezra Blackwood had cultivated over years of buying loyalty with money and favors, but enough. Enough to feel like hope. Eli thrived. In 3 weeks, he'd gained almost 2 pounds. His cheeks filled out. His eyes tracked movement with sharp, curious attention. He smiled at Clara's voice, reached for Jesse's finger with surprising strength. The baby was becoming a child. And in becoming a child, he was creating something Jesse hadn't anticipated: a family. It happened in small moments. Clara humming while she nursed Eli, her voice soft and sweet. Jesse catching her, watching him work, a slight smile on her face that disappeared when she noticed him noticing. Meals where they talked about more than just necessities, where Clara told stories about her childhood in Missouri, and Jesse shared memories of building the ranch with Sarah. The walls between them were coming down brick by brick, conversation by conversation. One morning, Jesse woke to find Clara in the kitchen with Eli the baby propped against her shoulder while she made coffee with one hand. The domestic simplicity of the scene hit him hard. This could be his life. This was his life. Clara looked up and caught him staring. "You're doing that thing with your jaw again." Jesse touched his face, unaware he'd been clenching it. "What thing?" "The clenching thing. You do it when you're thinking too hard about something." She poured him coffee, her movements efficient despite the baby on her hip. "What are you thinking about?" Jesse took the cup, their fingers brushing. "About how this feels more real than I expected it to." Clara's expression softened. "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" Before Jesse could respond, Eli reached out and grabbed his finger. The baby's grip was strong, determined, as if holding onto his father was the most important thing in the world. "He's getting so big," Clara murmured. "In another month, maybe 2, he'll be ready to try regular milk. Cow's milk mixed with a little water first, then stronger as his system adjusts." Jesse heard what she didn't say. In another month or 2, Eli wouldn't need her anymore. The practical reason for their arrangement would end. "Clara, I need to go somewhere today. To the ranch." She looked up sharply. "Why, Sharon?" "To visit Sarah's grave. I haven't been since before Eli was born. And I need to talk to her about everything that's happened." Clara's face went carefully neutral. "You don't need my permission." "I know, but I wanted you to know where I'd be, wanted you to understand why." "You're afraid I'll think you're comparing me to her." "No." Jesse set down his coffee cup. "I'm afraid of what I'm starting to feel. And before I can move forward, I need to make peace with the past." Clara studied his face for a long moment. "The feelings you're afraid of, are they about me?" "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. "I feel them too, and they terrify me." "Why, Diane?" "Because everyone I've ever loved has left, or died, or betrayed me." Her voice shook slightly. "I told myself this was just survival, just an arrangement. If I didn't let myself feel anything, I couldn't get hurt again." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "But it's too late for that, isn't it?" Jesse crossed to where she stood and took her free hand. "Go visit Sarah. Talk to her. Tell her whatever you need to tell her." Clara squeezed his fingers. "And when you come back, we'll figure out what this is, what we want it to be." The ride to the ranch took an hour. Jesse had avoided it, deliberately afraid of what he'd feel returning to the place where Sarah died. Now, as the familiar landscape unfolded around him, he found the grief had softened, not disappeared. Grief never truly disappeared, but changed into something he could carry without being crushed by its weight. The ranch looked abandoned. Shutters hung crooked. Weeds choked the gardens Sarah had tended so carefully. The chicken coop stood empty, its gates swinging loose in the wind. Jesse tied his horse and walked around back to the small plot under the cottonwood tree. Sarah's grave was covered in new grass. The wooden cross he'd made still stood, weathered by winter, but solid. Her name carved deep into the wood, along with the dates that marked a life far too short. Jesse sank to his knees. "Hey, sweetheart." His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm sorry I haven't been by. Things got complicated after you left." "More than complicated." He told her everything. About Eli nearly dying, about Clara opening her door, about the marriage and the feelings that were growing despite his attempts to keep them contained. He spoke aloud, his words carrying on the wind, needing to voice the confusion and guilt and hope that warred inside him. I think I'm falling in love with her, Sarah, and I don't know if that's betraying you or honoring you or something in between. The cottonwood leaves rustled overhead. No answer came, but Jesse hadn't expected one. You told me to take care of him, made me promise, and I'm doing that. Clara's helping me do that. He touched the cross, his fingers tracing her name. But I need to know if it's okay. If it's okay to love someone else. If it's okay to build a life with her. Silence stretched. Then from somewhere deep in memory, Sarah's voice came to him. Words she'd spoken years ago when they'd talked about death, about what would happen if one of them died first. Promise me you won't spend the rest of your life grieving. Promise me you'll find happiness again, even if it's not with me. He'd promised, hadn't believed he'd ever have to keep it. Now here he was. I love you, Sarah. I'll always love you. Jesse's voice broke. But I think I can love her too. I think there's room in my heart for both of you. He stood slowly, his knees protesting from kneeling on cold ground, touched the cross one last time. Thank you for loving me, for giving me Eli, for making me promise to keep living. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. He was halfway back to Pine Ridge when he saw the smoke. Black clouds rising from the direction of town, from the east edge of town, from where Clara's house stood. Jesse's blood turned to ice. He kicked his horse into a gallop, riding harder than he'd ever ridden, the wind tearing at his face, his heart pounding terror into his throat. Not Clara, not Eli, please God, not them. He rounded the last bend and saw it. Clara's house engulfed in flames. Fire consumed the walls, the roof, everything. Heat hit him 50 feet away, so intense it made his eyes water. Smoke billowed thick and black, carrying the smell of burning wood and destroyed lives. People ran everywhere, carrying buckets of water that did nothing against the inferno. Shouting, crying, chaos given form and sound. Jesse jumped from his horse before it fully stopped. Clara! His voice tore through the noise. People turned, their faces smudged with soot. Ruth Jennings grabbed his arm. Jesse, stop. You can't go in there. Where is she? Where's my wife? Where's my son? They got out. They're safe. Ruth pointed toward a group gathered near the street. Sheriff Dawkins has them. Jesse shoved through the crowd until he found them. Clara sat on the ground, Eli clutched to her chest. Her face was black with soot. Her dress was burned along the hem, showing raw reddened skin beneath. But she was alive. Eli was crying that beautiful, healthy cry that meant he was okay. Jesse fell to his knees beside them and pulled them both into his arms. Clara, Clara, look at me. She looked up. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, trapped somewhere between shock and terror. He came. Her voice was barely audible. Ezra came while you were gone. He had men with him. Dutch Morrison and two others I didn't recognize. They broke down the door. Jesse felt rage ignite in his chest, white hot and terrible. Did they hurt you? Did they touch you? I ran, grabbed Eli and ran out the back. Tears cut channels through the soot on her face. I could hear him laughing while he set fire to my home, to William's things, everything I had left of my son. Her composure shattered completely. She collapsed against Jesse's chest, her whole body shaking with sobs that seemed torn from somewhere deep inside. Eli wailed between them, picking up on his mother's terror. Jesse held them both while his mind went cold and calculating. Ezra Blackwood had done this, had tried to kill his wife and son, had burned everything Clara had left. There would be a reckoning. Sheriff Dawkins appeared at his shoulder. Montgomery, I know who did this. Then arrest him. Jesse's voice was deadly quiet. Arrest him now. He's gone. Him and Dutch and the others rode out right after they started the fire, probably halfway to the territory line by now. Jesse stood carefully, passing Clara to Ruth's care. Then I'll find him myself. Jesse, no. Clara grabbed his arm. Don't let him turn you into a killer. Don't let him take you away from us. Jesse looked at her, at Eli, at his family. Every instinct screamed at him to ride after Ezra, to hunt him down, to make him pay in blood for what he'd done. But Clara's eyes held him, pleaded with him, reminded him of what mattered. I promised Sarah I'd take care of him. Jesse's voice shook with the effort of controlling his rage. I promised you I'd stay. He sat back down and pulled them close. I'm not going anywhere. Around them, the fire raged on. But inside the circle of Jesse's arms, his family was safe. And in that moment, that was enough. Revenge could wait. Justice could wait. Family couldn't wait. So, Ruth Jennings opened her home to them. Her house was small, barely big enough for one person, much less four. But she made room, clearing out her spare bedroom, bringing blankets and clothes donated by neighbors. The town had witnessed the fire, seen Clara escape with Eli, watched Jesse return to find his home destroyed. And something shifted in Pine Ridge that day. Women arrived with food. Men offered to help rebuild. Reverend Hayes came to pray with them, his face troubled. I was wrong about you, Clara, he said quietly. About both of you. We all were. Others echoed the sentiment. Mrs. Patterson brought clothes. The widow Cole offered blankets. Even Mrs. Morrison, who'd refused to help when Eli was dying, came with a basket of bread and an apology she couldn't quite voice. We let Ezra poison this town, Ruth said that evening as she served dinner. Let his hatred become our hatred. Let his fear become our fear. The fire didn't just burn your house, Clara. It burned away the rot that was eating us from the inside. Jesse looked around the crowded kitchen. These people who had turned their backs 3 weeks ago were now offering help without being asked. The transformation was remarkable and unsettling. Why now, he asked. What changed? You did. Sheriff Dawkins had joined them for the meal. Both of you. You stood up to Ezra, refused to be intimidated, married despite the scandal, kept living despite everything we threw at you. He set down his fork. Sometimes it takes someone brave to remind the rest of us what courage looks like. 3 weeks later, word came. Sheriff Dawkins arrived at Ruth's house early in the morning. His face was grim. Ezra Blackwood is dead. Jesse felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just a hollow emptiness where rage used to live. What happened? U.S. Marshal caught up with him near the Colorado border. Ezra drew on him. Dawkins shook his head. Wasn't much of a contest. Marshall's got a reputation for a reason. And the others? Dutch and his men are in custody. They'll stand trial for arson and attempted murder. They're already talking, trying to blame everything on Ezra, saying he forced them into it. Clara sat at the table, Eli in her arms. Her face was calm, but Jesse saw her hands trembling. It's over, then. It's over. Dawkins pulled an envelope from his coat. There's more. Ezra had no family, no will. Everything he owned goes to the territory by law, but the town council met yesterday morning. He set the envelope on the table. They voted unanimously to give his property to you and Jesse. Call it restitution for what he did, for what he took from you. Jesse stared at the envelope. It was thick, heavy, with more money than he'd ever seen in his life. We don't want his blood money. It's not about want, it's about right. Dawkins looked at Clara. Ezra Blackwood spent 20 years poisoning this town. His money built the general store, the saloon, half the buildings on Main Street. Now that money can build something better. Like what? Clara's voice was quiet. That's up to you, but I know if anyone can turn something evil into something good, it's you two. After the sheriff left, Jesse and Clara sat in silence. Eli had fallen asleep, his tiny hand curled around Clara's finger. What do you want to do with it? Jesse asked finally. Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, certain. I want to build something, not just a house, something that matters. What kind of something? A place for women like me, women who've lost children, lost husbands, lost everything. Her voice grew stronger. A place where they can come and not be judged, not be called cursed or broken, just helped. Jesse felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just an idea. This was purpose, destiny, legacy, Haven House. Clara looked at him, surprised. What? That's what we should call it, Haven House. Because that's what your home was for me, for Eli. A haven when we had nowhere else to go. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Haven House, she repeated softly. Yes, that's perfect. They broke ground in late April. Half the town turned out to help. Men who'd shunned Jesse months ago now worked beside him, raising walls, laying foundations. Women brought food and fabric, offered to help furnish the rooms once the building was complete. The change hadn't happened overnight. It had come gradually, person by person, conversation by conversation. The fire had been a catalyst, a moment when Pine Ridge saw clearly what Ezra's hatred had wrought. But it was Clara and Jesse who sealed the transformation through their refusal to leave, their willingness to forgive, their determination to build instead of destroy. Ruth Jennings watched from a stump one afternoon, Eli napping in her lap as the construction progressed. "You're becoming local heroes. People can't stop talking about the Montgomery family." Clara was sorting nails, her hands quick and efficient. "We're not heroes. We're just people trying to survive." "Same thing in my experience." Ruth smiled. "Heroes aren't born, they're made by hardship, by choice, by refusing to give up when giving up would be easier." Jesse wiped sweat from his forehead. The spring sun was warm, the first real warmth after months of brutal cold. "Never thought of it that way." "Most heroes don't." Ruth looked down at Eli. "This little one's going to grow up with quite a story. How his daddy begged for milk in a blizzard. How his mama opened her door to a stranger. How they built a family from nothing." "He won't remember any of it," Clara said. "He won't have to. You'll tell him, and he'll tell his children. And they'll tell theirs." Ruth's voice softened. "That's how legacies work. Not through monuments or money. Through stories passed down. Through love that outlasts the people who started it." The house rose slowly, taking shape beam by beam, nail by nail. It wasn't just a house anymore. Clara's vision had expanded as they worked. The main building had 4 bedrooms, 1 for their family, 3 for women who needed shelter, a large kitchen designed for feeding many, a parlor that could serve as a gathering space, a small library filled with books donated by families across town. Jesse worked from dawn to dusk, his hands developing new calluses, his muscles remembering the rhythm of hard labor. At night, he'd return to Ruth's house exhausted but satisfied. Clara would have dinner ready. Eli bathed and fed, ready to be held while Jesse ate. They fell into new patterns, comfortable ones. Jesse would tell Clara about the day's progress. She'd share stories from the women who'd started visiting, asking when Haven House would be ready, sharing their own tales of loss and survival. And slowly, almost without noticing, the walls between them came down completely. One evening, Clara said something that made Jesse laugh, really laugh, the kind that came from deep in the belly and felt like medicine. She stared at him, startled, then smiled. "I've never heard you laugh before. Haven't had much to laugh about." "No, I suppose not." She paused. "But it's nice. You should do it more often." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Jesse felt something spark between them, electricity that had been building for weeks finally finding a path to ground. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "I know." Her voice was soft. "I feel it too." "Feel what?" "That this stopped being just survival somewhere along the way. That we're not just partners anymore." Jesse stood and crossed to where she sat, knelt beside her chair. "I love you. I tried not to. Told myself it was too soon, that I was betraying Sarah's memory. But I can't help it. I love you, Clara Montgomery." Clara's hand came up to cup his face. "I love you too. And I'm terrified, because loving someone means you can lose them. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose again." "Then we'll be strong together." Jesse leaned into her touch. "Same plan as always. We face whatever comes together." Clara pulled him up and kissed him. Not the chaste kiss from their wedding, but something real, deep, full of promise and fear and hope, all tangled together. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should probably tell Ruth we need to move into our own room soon," Clara whispered. Jesse laughed again. "Probably should." 2 months later, Haven House was finished. They moved in on a perfect June day, carrying the few possessions they'd accumulated since the fire. The house smelled of fresh wood and new paint and possibility. Their first resident arrived 3 days later, a young woman named Molly, barely 20, pregnant and abandoned by a husband who'd gone west searching for gold and never returned. She stood at the blue door, newly installed, looking lost and frightened. Clara took one look at her and opened the door wide. "Welcome home." Molly burst into tears. Within a month, Haven House was full. Women came from across the territory. Widows, abandoned wives, mothers who'd lost children and didn't know how to keep living. Clara counseled them. Jesse taught them practical skills: how to manage money, how to find work, how to survive. Ruth Jennings provided medical care. And Eli grew surrounded by a community of people who'd been broken and were learning to be whole again. One evening in late summer, Clara was unusually quiet during dinner. Jessie noticed her pushing food around her plate, not eating. "You all right?" She looked up, her eyes bright. "I saw Ruth today. She confirmed something I'd suspected." Jessie's heart stopped. "Confirmed what?" Clara took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Jessie. Our baby." The world tilted. Jessie pulled her into his arms, Eli squeaking in protest from being squeezed between them. "A baby. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Clara's voice held uncertainty. "I know it's soon. I know we haven't been together long as a real married couple." "Happy?" Jessie pulled back to look at her face. "Clara, I don't have words. I'm terrified and grateful and amazed and so in love with you I can barely breathe." Clara laughed through her tears. "That's a lot of feelings." "Get used to it. I've been holding them back for months. Not holding back anymore." They held each other as the sun set, Eli wiggling between them, demanding attention. A family. Not the one Jesse had planned, not the one he'd imagined, but the one he was meant to have. The pregnancy progressed without complication. Clara bloomed, her body rounding with new life, her face losing the gaunt sharpness hunger and grief had carved into it. She worked at Haven House almost until the day she went into labor counseling, women managing the household, building the community that would become her legacy. Eli learned to walk then, to talk, his first clear word being mama, while looking at Clara. Jesse had frozen, uncertain how to feel, but Clara had just smiled and scooped the boy up. "That's right, little one. I'm your mama." And she was. In every way that mattered, Eli was hers. The fact that Sarah had given him life didn't diminish Clara's role in saving it, in nurturing it, in making him who he was becoming. October came cold and early, on a night that reminded Jesse painfully of the blizzard a year before Clara's labor began. Ruth Jennings was there immediately, having moved into Haven House weeks ago, to be ready when the time came. She set up the bedroom with practiced efficiency, sent the other residents to care for Eli and keep him calm, then focused entirely on Clara. Jesse held his wife's hand through every contraction. This time he wasn't standing helplessly outside while a woman he loved died giving birth. This time he was here, present, allowed to help however he could. "You're doing so well," he kept saying. "So strong, so brave." "Stop talking," Clara gasped between pains. "Just be here." So he was there, silent, steady, refusing to let go. The labor lasted 6 hours, long but not dangerously so. Ruth coached Clara through each push, her voice calm and experienced. And at 3:47 in the morning, exactly 1 year to the minute after Sarah died, their daughter was born. She came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. "She's perfect," Ruth said, placing the baby in Clara's arms. "Absolutely perfect." Clara looked down at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful, Jessie. Look at her." Jesse looked and felt something crack open in his chest. This tiny, perfect creature, his daughter, the child he'd made with the woman he loved. Proof that life continued. That hope was real, that even after the darkest night, morning still came. "What should we name her?" Clara asked. Jesse had thought about this, turned it over in his mind for months. Sarah Ruth Montgomery, after the two women who made this possible. Clara's breath caught. She looked at Ruth, who was wiping her eyes with her apron. "Ruth, don't look at me. I'm just a sentimental fool." Clara laughed through her tears. "Sarah Ruth, it's perfect." She looked down at the baby and at Sarah and smiled. "Welcome to the world, little one. You're going to have quite a life." The next morning, Jesse found Eli standing at Clara's bedside, peering at his new sister with intense concentration. "Baby," Eli said. It wasn't a question. "That's right, buddy. That's your sister, Sarah." Eli reached out one small hand and touched Sarah's cheek with surprising gentleness. The baby stirred, made a small sound, then settled again. "My baby," Eli declared. Clara laughed weakly. "She's all our baby. You're going to be such a good big brother." "My baby," Eli repeated stubbornly. Jesse lifted his son into his arms. That's the Montgomery stubbornness talking. Pretty sure he gets it from both of us, Clara said. They looked at each other. This family they'd built from wreckage and hope. Two people who'd lost everything. Two children who represented new beginnings. We did it, Clara whispered. We actually did it. Did what? Built a life, a real one, after everything. She looked at Jesse, her eyes shining. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. It's real. Jesse leaned down and kissed her forehead. This is real. We're real. And it's only going to get better. Spring came again as it always did. Snow melted, flowers bloomed, and on a perfect April morning, the town of Pine Ridge gathered for a celebration. 1 year since Haven House opened its doors. 1 year since Clara and Jesse had decided to build something instead of running away. 1 year of healing and growth and transformation. Jesse stood at the edge of the crowd, Sarah in his arms, watching Clara speak. She stood on the steps of Haven House surrounded by the women who'd found shelter there. Molly now healthy and raising her daughter. 3 widows who'd become like sisters. A young mother escaping an abusive husband. A girl barely 16 who'd been thrown out by her family for getting pregnant. All of them saved. All of them healing. Clara's voice carried across the crowd, strong and clear. 1 year ago, I was the woman this town called cursed. I'd lost my son, lost my husband, lost everything that mattered. She paused, found Jesse's eyes in the crowd. Then a stranger knocked on my door, a desperate man with a dying baby, and everything changed. The crowd listened in silence. I didn't save him that night. We saved each other. And in saving each other, we found something neither of us expected. Love, family, purpose. She gestured to Haven House behind her. This place exists because of that night. Because 2 broken people decided to try anyway. Decided that giving up wasn't an option. Decided that hope was worth fighting for even when everything seemed hopeless. She stepped down from the porch and walked through the crowd toward Jesse, toward their children. I used to think family was something you were born into, something you couldn't choose. I was wrong. Clara reached Jesse and took his hand. Family is what you build, what you fight for, what you refuse to let go of, no matter how hard the world tries to tear it apart. She turned to address the crowd one final time. To everyone here today, thank you. Thank you for opening your hearts, for giving us a chance, for proving that people can change, that towns can change, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Applause erupted, cheers, shouts of support, but Jesse barely heard it. He was looking at Clara, at Eli, standing between them now, 2 years old, at Sarah, 5 months old, sleeping in his arms. His family, built from nothing but a knock on a door and 2 people refusing to give up. I love you, he said. Clara smiled, that brilliant smile that still took his breath away. I love you too. They stood together as the celebration swirled around them, a family forged in fire and grief and impossible hope. Behind them, Haven House rose against the spring sky, a testament to what could be built when people chose love over fear. Ahead of them, the future stretched open and full of possibility. Jesse didn't know what that future held. Didn't know what challenges would come, what joys would arrive, what sorrows might still find them. But he knew one thing for certain: whatever came, they would face it together. Haven House, spring 1938. Jesse finished speaking and looked at his grandson. Thomas sat with tears streaming down his face, not bothering to wipe them away. That's how it all began, a knock on a door. That's how it began. Jesse's voice was soft. Your grandmother Clara saved your father's life. But in doing so, she saved mine too. Gave me purpose when I had none. Hope when all seemed lost. He stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the garden bloomed. Inside, he could hear the sounds of women preparing dinner, children playing, life continuing in the home Clara had built. She died 3 years ago, your grandmother, in her sleep, peacefully surrounded by family. The last thing she said to me was, "Thank you for knocking." Jesse's voice broke slightly. I told her I should be thanking her. She just smiled and said we'd saved each other, that it didn't matter who knocked and who opened. What mattered was that we both chose to trim him. Thomas joined his grandfather at the window, and the town Pine Ridge changed completely. Ezra's death was like lancing a wound. All the poison drained out, and what was left was good people who'd forgotten how to be good. They remembered, and they built something better. Jesse turned to face his grandson fully. I told you this story for a reason, Thomas. Not to brag or to make myself sound heroic, but to teach you what your grandmothers taught me. What's that? Strength isn't never falling. Strength is standing back up. Strength isn't never asking for help. Strength is knowing when you need it. Jesse put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. And strength isn't never being scared. Strength is doing what's right even when you're terrified. Thomas swallowed hard. I'm going to war. I'm going to be scared. You're going to be terrified. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to want to give up. Jesse squeezed his shoulder. But remember this, the strongest man I ever knew was the one who knocked on a stranger's door and cried. The strongest woman was the one who opened it even though the whole world hated her. What do I do if I don't know what's right? You do your best. You ask for help when you need it. You stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Jesse smiled slightly. And you remember that you come from people who chose love over hate, hope over despair, building over destroying. Thomas nodded slowly. Thank you, Grandpa, for telling me, for showing me what it really means to be strong. Now it's your story too. Pass it down. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren. Jesse looked back out the window. That's how legacies work. Not through monuments, through stories, through love that outlasts the people who started it. They stood together in comfortable silence as the sun set. Outside, the tulips bloomed in rows Sarah had planned and Clara had planted. A legacy written in flowers and choices, and the simple act of opening a door when the whole world said to keep it closed. Haven House stood solid and sure, built on foundations laid 59 years before by two broken people who chose to face an uncertain future together rather than face certain death alone. Jesse looked at the photographs on the mantel. Sarah young and smiling, Clara holding Eli as a baby. The two women who'd shaped his life, who'd taught him what love really meant, who'd given him a legacy worth passing down. Thank you, he whispered to them both, for everything, for teaching me, for saving me, for making me the man I needed to be. No answer came, but somehow Jesse felt them both smile. The next morning, Thomas left for basic training. Jesse stood on the porch of Haven House and watched his grandson disappear down the road heading toward a war that would test everything the boy had learned. But Jesse wasn't worried. Not really. Thomas carried their story now. Carried the strength of two grandmothers who'd faced impossible odds and won. Carried the knowledge that real courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite it. The boy would be fine. The Montgomery legacy would continue. Jesse turned and walked back into Haven House. Women greeted him. Children called for his attention. Life continued in its gentle, inevitable rhythm. And somewhere he liked to imagine Sarah and Clara watched over them all. The first wife who'd given him life's purpose. The second who'd taught him how to live again. Both gone now, but never forgotten. Their love, their sacrifice, their choice to open a door and build a family from nothing that lived on. In Eli, now 40 and running Haven House. In Sarah Ruth, a doctor serving communities across Wyoming. In Thomas, heading to war, carrying their story. In every woman who found shelter here when she had nowhere else to go. In every child born into safety and love. In every person who chose hope over despair. The legacy of a single knock on a blue door on a winter night in 1879. The legacy of two broken people who saved each other and in doing so saved a community. The legacy of love that chose to try. Jesse sat in his rocking chair, the wood welcoming him like an old friend. He closed his eyes and smiled. We did good, didn't we? He whispered to the memory of his wives. We built something that matters. And in the gentle creaking of the chair, the distant laughter of children, the warmth of home surrounding him, he heard their answer. Yes, you did good. The sun set over Pine Ridge. Another day ending, another night beginning. The eternal cycle of darkness and light loss in hope. Death in life. But Haven House stood through it all. A beacon, a refuge, a testament to the truth that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is knock on a door and ask for help. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give is opening that door and saying yes.